All right, so we discussed the idea of observational studies and experiments earlier when we were talking about that salt prisoner thing that they were suggesting doing. So the students in my traditional Monday, Wednesday might have skipped that section. Um, but the big difference between an observational and an experiment is that there is a treatment in an experiment. We are going to force people to do something, whether that is eat a diet high in salt or low in salt, watch a video, read a pamphlet. It can be something fairly innocuous, but we are doing something. This could even be one of my students last semester wanted to do for his research project. He had read something about how people are more likely to wash their hands in a restroom if somebody else was present and already washing their hands. So he considered doing an experiment where he went into the restrooms and just pretended to wash his hands and saw if people were more likely to wash their hands than when he was just standing there not washing his hands. So then they wouldn't even known that they were part of a treatment or control, but that was his treatment, was to randomly determine whether or not he was pretending to wash his hands at a particular moment. So that's an experiment. An observational study just observes. They don't try to randomize anything. They don't try to make anything happen. They just observe. So he could have also done his experiment as an observational study, and instead of him actually deciding, flipping a coin, whether he was going to wash his hands or not when he was standing in the restroom, he could have just observed if there was already someone in the restroom washing their hands and seen what the next person did, or if they weren't washing their hands, what that person did. So that's the difference between an observational study and an experiment. We don't try to influence anything, we just collect data versus we try to influence what's happening. Now, an observational study has huge limitations. You cannot say that there's any sort of causal thing going on in an observational study. And this is a big deal in that a lot of the stuff that people present as actually having some sort of causal relationship is strictly observational. Some examples are our CT program. Our CT program, they love to show off data on the more CT sessions a student attends, the better they do in the class or in school in general. And that's great, but we can't randomly assign students to attend the CT sessions. So it's a lot better to look at the classes as a whole than it is to look at individual students, because those students who go to every CT session are different than the students who aren't going to every CT session. Whether it's just that they have that time in their schedule to do so, or if it's that they're so dedicated to their studies that they're willing to go for an extra hour or two each week to these classroom tutor sessions. So that's a big deal. Another example of an observational study and sort of the incorrect assumptions is the link between caffeine and miscarriage. Um, there's been a lot of studies that show this women who drink more caffeine in the first trimester of their pregnancy are more likely to miscarry. But there's a big, what we're going to call, and we're going to see later, confounding variable here. So let me just quickly, I'll draw a little picture, even though we haven't gotten to confounding technically, is that we have this, oh no, that's a highlighter. We have this idea that increased amount of coffee intake might influence miscarriage. But there's a giant confounding variable that isn't really taken into account. And if you take it into account, this relationship doesn't exist. And that relationship is a lack of nausea. Oh my God, can I spell nausea? Oh my God, I have no idea. I'm gonna look this up. I know that this is riveting video here, guys. Nausea. Oh, it was as simple as I thought. So people who have very little nausea can actually drink coffee in the morning, right? Whereas those women who are dealing with morning sickness, they're not feeling like a cup of coffee because they're trying to just keep anything down. And lack of nausea is also a sign that you might not have a healthy pregnancy and that you might miscarry. So when you actually look at this as a confounding variable, it turns out that there's nothing left in terms of that relationship between coffee and miscarriage. Not that I'm saying go out and drink a bunch of coffee, but we can't do an experiment on something like this. It is not ethically okay for us to tell a bunch of pregnant women to drink a bunch of coffee just to see if there's a link. So we can never talk about a causation with an observational study. All we can say is these two populations are different. people who drink a lot of coffee are different than people who don't drink a lot of coffee. That reason may be that they're nauseous. It may not be, so we can't make it causal. However, if we want to actually make those decisions, we need an experiment. So for a lot of things that we can't do experiments for, education is one of them. We can't really, like, if we think something's going to help a lot of students, we usually try to give it to as many students as possible. That's always an issue. So anyways, that was a very long talk about observational studies versus experiments. And we have one exercise. I'll go ahead and split this up into a second video.